Stop acting like you own me. I can do whatever I want, she snapped. I took a deep breath and said, "You're right." Then I walked away and gave her exactly that, a life without me in it. Hey viewers, before we move on to the video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button if you want to see more stories like this. Thanks. Stop acting like you own me. I can do whatever I want. Those 9 words, standing in the middle of our kitchen, said to me like I was an inconvenience she was done tolerating. I remember the exact sound of the refrigerator humming behind her. I remember the way the evening light was cutting through the blinds and painting thin orange stripes across the floor between us. I remember thinking, not panicking, not crying, just thinking, with a kind of terrifying stillness. I've heard this before. Not from her. From myself. I'd rehearsed how I would respond to this moment approximately 12 times over the past 4 months. Lying awake at 2 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan while she slept like nothing was wrong. I'd imagine yelling. I'd imagine crying. I'd imagine begging. But I didn't do any of those things. I took a deep breath. I looked at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in a long time, and I said 2 words. "You're right." And then I walked out of that kitchen. I walked past the framed photo of us from our trip to the coast 3 years ago. I walked past the little ceramic bowl by the front door where we both threw our keys. I picked up my jacket from the hook, and I closed the door behind me. Not with a slam. Not with drama. Just a quiet, firm click. The kind that sounds like the end of a chapter. Let me back up, because the moment I just described didn't come out of nowhere, even if it felt that way to her. I was 31. She was 29. Her name was Amber, and we had been together for 4 years, living together for the last 2 of those. We weren't married, but we were close enough that our names were on the same lease. Our groceries went in the same cart, and her mother called me at Christmas. Close enough that when people asked about my life, she was the first thing I mentioned. That's all you need to know going in. Everything else, I'll give you as it happened. The first time I noticed something was off, it wasn't dramatic. It never is at the start. We were at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. This was about 8 months before that kitchen moment, and Amber was across the room talking to a guy I didn't know, which was fine. She knew more people in that circle than I did, and I was never the jealous type. But I watched her laugh at something he said, and the laugh was different. Full teeth. Head tilted back. The kind of laugh she used to give me in year 1, when everything I said was apparently the funniest thing she'd ever heard. I noticed it. Filed it somewhere in the back of my mind. Didn't say anything. We drove home together. She talked about how fun it was. I agreed, and that was that. But the filing cabinet in the back of my brain had started collecting. 3 weeks later, she started going to the gym on Saturday mornings, which was new. Amber had, for the entire time I'd known her, considered the gym a kind of organized punishment. She'd said that to me once. The gym is just society's way of making you feel guilty for having a body, and I'd laughed and said she had a point. So the Saturday gym thing caught my attention. New clothes for it, too. Not the old, oversized university shirt she used to wear on lazy weekends. Actual coordinated sets. Hair done before she went. I asked her about it once. Casually, not accusingly. Just mentioned that it was great she was getting into it, and asked what had sparked the motivation. She shrugged and said her coworker had recommended it. I said that was cool, and I believed her, because at that point, I was still choosing to believe her. There's something nobody tells you about the slow erosion of trust in a relationship. It doesn't feel like betrayal at first. It feels like static. Like the signal between 2 people who used to be perfectly in sync just starts losing clarity. You hear each other, but you're not quite receiving the full transmission anymore. She started keeping her phone face down. Not always. Just more than before. She started having dinner plans with the girls on Fridays. Which was fine. She had friends. She should have a life. But when I asked which friends, the answers were always a little vague. Oh, you know, people from work. My friend from the yoga class. Just a few people, you wouldn't know them. And again, none of that is automatically suspicious. I know that. I knew it then. But when you combine the new gym routine and the tilted back laugh and the vague plans and the face down phone, the filing cabinet starts getting heavy. I want to be honest about something here. I wasn't perfect in this relationship either. I worked long hours. I was in the middle of a demanding stretch at my job, pulling 12-hour days sometimes, missing dinners, too tired on weekends to be fully present. I know I'd been distracted. I know I'd been less attentive than I should have been. I'm not trying to paint myself as the wronged saint and her as the villain. I'm just telling you what happened. The first actual argument, The first one that felt like something more than a disagreement happened on a Tuesday night in February. I'd come home late from work, exhausted, carrying takeout because I hadn't had the energy to cook and I didn't want to make her cook either. I set the bags on the counter. She was on the couch, phone in hand, and she barely looked up. "Hey," I said. "Hey," she said. "I got Thai, the place you like." She glanced at the bags. I already ate. Which, fine. I didn't expect her to hold dinner for me every night. But something about the flatness of her voice, combined with the fact that she didn't look up from her phone, combined with the fact that she hadn't mentioned she'd already eaten when I'd texted her 40 minutes earlier asking if she wanted anything, it landed weird. I put my food on a plate, sat at the kitchen table alone, and ate in silence. She stayed on the couch. After maybe 20 minutes, I said, "You okay?" She said, "Yeah." "What? You seem quiet." "I'm just tired." "Okay." I cleaned up. I showered. I got into bed. She came in an hour later, and I was already mostly asleep, and she didn't say goodnight. I lay there in the dark telling myself it was just a bad evening. We all had bad evenings. It didn't mean anything. But the evenings kept being bad. Not everyone. That's the thing that makes these situations so hard to navigate. It's not a steady decline. It's inconsistent. One week, she'd be warm and funny, and we'd stay up talking past midnight like we used to. The next, she'd be distant and prickly, and anything I said felt like I was speaking into a wall. I started calibrating my behavior based on her mood when I walked in the door. Read the room, gauge the temperature, decide how much space to give. And somewhere in the process of doing all of that, I stopped being myself. I started being careful. And a man who has to be careful in his own home is not actually at home. He's just visiting. I had one close friend I talked to through all of this, a guy named Owen who I'd known since college. Owen had been through his own relationship implosion a few years back, so he had a kind of quiet, earned wisdom about these things. I called him one evening in March, sitting in my car in the parking garage at work, not ready to go home yet. I told him what I'd been noticing. The distance, the vagueness, the feeling that I was somehow becoming invisible in my own relationship. Owen was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Are you asking her about it?" I said I'd tried, but she always deflected. He said, "Then you need to ask harder." I told him I didn't want to push her away by seeming jealous or controlling. Owen went quiet again. Then he said something I've thought about 100 times since. He said, "Worrying about seeming controlling is what you do when you care more about being perceived well than about actually knowing the truth. Figure out which one matters more to you." I sat with that for a while. Then I drove home. I asked her about it that night. Not an interrogation, just a real conversation, the kind I'd been tiptoeing around for months. I sat down on the couch next to her and I turned down the TV and I said, "I feel like there's been a lot of distance between us lately, and I don't know if it's something I'm doing, but I want to understand what's going on." She looked at me. For a second, just a second, something passed across her face that I couldn't read. Then it closed. "There's nothing going on," she said. "You sure?" "Because it feels like." I said there's nothing going on. Her voice had an edge to it. Not anger exactly. More like irritation. Like I was accusing her of something by simply noticing her behavior. I nodded slowly. "Okay," I said. "I'm just telling you how it feels from my side." "You're overanalyzing," she said. "Not everything is a problem." And she turned the TV volume back up. "I want to tell you about the night in April. Because the April night is when the filing cabinet stopped just collecting and started spilling over. It was a Friday. She'd said she was going to dinner with a couple of coworkers. I had no reason to doubt that. I stayed home, ordered pizza, watched a movie, went to bed. She wasn't home when I fell asleep, which wasn't alarming. She'd been out late with friends before. But I woke up at 3 in the morning and the other side of the bed was empty. I checked my phone. No texts. I sent one. "Hey, you okay? Just woke up and you're not home." Nothing for 20 minutes. Then, "Sorry, lost track of time. On my way." She came in just after 3:30. I was lying in bed, not fully asleep, and I heard her moving around in the dark, trying to be quiet. She got into bed, and I asked as naturally as I could, "How was dinner?" "Good," she said. "Just lost track of time." "Yeah, we were talking." "Who was there?" A pause. "Small, but there. Cassie and a few other people." "Have a good time?" "Yeah." "Go back to sleep." I did. Or I pretended to. I stared at the ceiling for a long time. I want to be clear about something. I didn't know for certain that she was lying. I suspected. I felt, with the kind of gut certainty that isn't quite proof, but isn't quite nothing, that things were not what she was presenting them as. But I didn't have evidence. And I had two choices. I could demand answers, confront her, risk the explosion, or I could wait, watch, and see what the truth decided to do on its own. I chose to wait. May came. She got her hair cut, a real change, not a trim, a completely different style. She started wearing perfume more often, even to places she'd never bothered before. She laughed at her phone sometimes, this private little smile, and when I asked what was funny, she'd just say a meme and put the phone down. She was present with me less and less, even when she was physically there. We were living parallel lives in the same apartment, polite to each other, functional, but the warmth was almost entirely gone. And then, one afternoon in late May, she told me something that put a very specific crack in my composure. She said she'd run into that guy from the birthday party, the one whose laugh I'd noticed months ago, and that they'd been texting a little. Just as friends, she said quickly, preemptively, like she knew the word texting would require clarification. He's in a really similar place career-wise right now, and it's nice to have someone who gets it. I looked at her. You're texting someone I've never met and never heard of until right now. I'm texting a friend, yes. Does he know you have a boyfriend? She gave me a look. The look. The one that said, here we go? Yes, she said. Obviously. What's his name? Why does that matter? And there it was. The thing I needed to hear without knowing I needed to hear it. Why does that matter? If he was just a friend. If there was nothing to hide. Why would his name matter? It matters, I said, keeping my voice completely level. Because you're my partner, and I'd like to know the names of the people you're spending time with. I'm not spending time with him. I'm texting. Amber. What? His name. She stared at me. Flynn, she said finally. His name is Flynn. Thank you, I said, and I let it go. For then. I'm going to jump ahead to June. Because June is when I stopped being sad and started being done. Not all at once. It didn't happen in a single day. It was a gradual shift, the way a ship starts to list before it actually turns. I called Owen again, told him about Flynn, about the 3 a.m. Friday, about the perfume and the private smiles and the face-down phone and the question, why does that matter? Owen listened to all of it. Then he said, what do you want to do? I want to know the truth. And if the truth is what you think it is? I thought about that for a long time. Then I want out, I said, and saying it, even just to Owen, sitting in my car in a parking lot again, felt like releasing a breath I'd been holding since February. The argument that finally cracked things open happened on a Saturday in late June. She'd made plans to go out, again, and this time I'd asked to come. Not demanded. Asked. Said something like, hey, do you think I could come? I feel like we haven't actually done anything together in a while. And she said, it's just a thing with a few people. You wouldn't know anyone. I could meet them. It would be weird. Why would it be weird for your boyfriend to come to a social thing? I just want to go and not have to worry about you being bored or uncomfortable. That sentence. Worry about you being bored or uncomfortable. I wasn't the one who was uncomfortable. I was the one being excluded from my own partner's social life and then told it was for my benefit. Amber, I said, I'm not asking for a detailed itinerary. I'm asking if I can come to a social thing with my girlfriend. That's a normal thing to ask. You're making this a whole thing. I haven't raised my voice. You don't have to raise your voice to make something a whole thing. Can I come or not? She looked at me. No, she said. Why not? Because I want to go alone. To a group gathering. Yes. With Flynn. Silence. Will Flynn be there? Probably, she said. The word landed like a stone. Probably. And you don't want me there because you're going to be weird about it. Exactly like you're being right now. I'm being weird. You're acting jealous and possessive, and I don't like it. There it was. The reframe. My asking reasonable questions had become me being jealous and possessive. My existing in my relationship had become a problem she needed to manage. I didn't go to the gathering. I stayed home. I sat with that conversation for a long time, turned it over in my head, looked at it from every angle, and I kept coming back to the same thing. She had said, you're acting jealous and possessive. But what I'd actually done was asked to spend time with her. What I'd actually done was asked to meet the person she was spending increasing amounts of time communicating with. What I'd actually done was express, in plain and measured language, that I wanted to be included in her life. If that was possessive, then the word had lost its meaning. And then I did something I'm not entirely proud of. I went through her phone. Not a deep dive. I wasn't going to read through years of messages. But she left it on the counter when she went to change, and the screen was unlocked, and the conversation with Flynn was right there. I scrolled up about a month. I read enough. I put the phone back down. I went and sat on the couch, and I waited for her to come home. I'm not going to share every detail of what I read, partly because it doesn't matter, and partly because even now, telling this story, I want to keep some dignity intact, mine and hers both. What I'll say is this: the messages were not innocent. They were not the messages of two people who were simply colleagues with shared professional interests. They were warm. They were flirtatious. They referenced things she and I had been through, things she'd apparently shared with him, repackaged as evidence that her relationship was suffocating her. There was one message in particular. She'd written, "He means well, but he doesn't really see me. He never has. Me. He never has." I sat with that for a very long time. She came home around midnight. I was on the couch, not watching the TV that was on. She saw me and said, "You're still up?" "Yeah." She came and sat in the armchair across from me, not next to me on the couch. "Good night?" I asked. "Yeah, it was nice." I nodded. "Was Flynn there?" "Yeah." "Was it just the two of you at some point?" A pause. "We walked around a bit after." "What?" "Just asking." She looked at me. "Are you going to start with the interrogation again?" "I'm not interrogating you." "It feels like you are." "I'm asking about your evening." "You're asking about Flynn." "Well, Flynn seems to be a significant part of your evenings lately." Her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means exactly what it sounds like." She stood up. "I'm not doing this tonight. Amber, I'm tired. We need to talk about what's happening." "Nothing is happening." "I don't believe you." That stopped her. She turned around slowly. "Excuse me." I said, "I don't believe you." Her jaw tightened. "You're saying I'm lying to you." "I'm saying I think something is going on between you and Flynn, and I think you know that I know. And I think this conversation is the one we've been avoiding for months." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "I'm not having this conversation when you're in this mood." "What mood?" I haven't raised my voice. "You're being accusatory." "I'm being honest." "You're being controlling." And there was that word again. Controlling. I want to tell you about the next 2 weeks, because they were the two most clarifying weeks of my entire adult life. After that night, something shifted in me. I stopped trying to fix it. I stopped trying to be the perfect understanding partner. I stopped monitoring my own behavior through the lens of, will this make me seem jealous or controlling? I just started being honest. With myself, mostly. I took stock of the past 4 years. The early years had been genuinely good. We'd clicked in a real way. Same sense of humor, compatible rhythms. We made each other better in the small daily ways that matter. But looking back with honest eyes, I could see a pattern I'd been too close to notice before. Amber had a habit of making me feel like the problem. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. Just, whenever there was friction, whenever I raised something that concerned me, the issue would somehow migrate. It would stop being about what I'd raised and start being about how I'd raised it. About my tone. About my neediness. About my failure to trust her. And I'd spend so much energy defending my approach that the original concern would get buried. I'd noticed it in small moments for years. I just hadn't let myself see it as a pattern. During those 2 weeks, she was at her warmest in months. Which sounds like a good thing. It wasn't. It was the warmth of someone who suspects you're about to leave and is recalibrating. She made my favorite dinner one night, unprompted. She suggested we watch a movie together, a real one, sitting close, her head on my shoulder. She held my hand in a parking lot. And every time she did these things, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Nothing. Not coldness. Not anger. Just the absence of what those gestures used to produce in me. Like trying to play a record on a player that no longer has a needle. The motions were right. The music wasn't there. I talked to Owen one more time before it happened. I told him what I'd read on her phone. I told him about the pattern I'd finally let myself see. I told him I was done, but that I hadn't said it out loud to her yet. Owen asked why not. I said I wasn't sure I could do it without anger, and I didn't want to have an angry ending. Owen thought about that. Then he said, "The cleanest exits aren't made in anger. They're made in clarity. Wait for clarity." 2 days later, I had it. It was a Thursday evening. She'd been home all day. Working from home was something she did a few days a week. I'd come back from the office around 6. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, and she was on the phone, laughing. That same laugh. Full teeth. Head tilted. I put my bag down, made myself a glass of water. She wrapped up the call, quick once she noticed me, just a yeah, okay, talk later, and put the phone down. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. "How was your day?" "Fine." "Who was that?" She picked up her phone and turned it face down on the counter. "Flynn." She said it straight, like she was daring me to make something of it. "What were you two talking about?" "Just stuff." "About work?" "About a lot of things." Does he know we're in a relationship? I already told you he does. Because the way you're talking to him. Here we go. Amber. I knew you'd be like this. Like what? I walked in the door 30 seconds ago. You always do this. You come home and immediately start checking up on me, questioning me, treating me like I need to report to you. I asked who you were talking to. Because you're paranoid. Because your behavior for the past 6 months has given me reasons to ask questions. My behavior? She turned to face me fully now. My behavior has been completely normal. You're the one with the problem. You're the one who can't stand that I have friends, that I have a life that doesn't revolve entirely around you. That's not what You want to know everything. Who I'm with, where I am, who I'm talking to. It's exhausting. I'm your boyfriend. Which doesn't mean you own me. I never said. Stop acting like you own me. Her voice rose. I can do whatever I want. And there it was. 9 words. Standing in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming, the evening light making stripes on the floor. I looked at her, and something that had been under pressure for a very long time went completely still. Not numb. Still. Clear. I took a breath, and I said, "You're right." She blinked. She'd expected a fight. She'd loaded up for an argument, had her defenses ready, was braced for the escalation. And instead I'd agreed with her. "What?" she said. "You're right," I said again. Same tone. Same quiet. "I don't own you. You can do whatever you want." She stared at me. "That's all I have to say," I said. I picked up my jacket from the hook by the door. "Where are you going?" "For a drive." "We're in the middle of a conversation." "You said what you had to say." "I said what I had to say." "That's not. You can't just leave in the middle of." "Amber." I paused with my hand on the door. "You've been telling me in every way except directly for months now that this isn't working for you. I'm choosing to hear you." She opened her mouth. Closed it. "I'll be back later to get some things," I said. And I closed the door. That quiet, firm click. I drove to Owen's apartment. He opened the door, took one look at my face, and said, "Come in." I sat on his couch. He made coffee. I told him what happened. He listened to the whole thing. Then he said, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. "Like something's been set down," I said. "Like I've been carrying something heavy for a long time, and I just put it on the ground." Owen nodded. "That's the clarity," he said. "Yeah," I said. "That's the clarity." I stayed at Owen's that night. She called twice. I didn't answer. She texted, "I think you took what I said the wrong way." I read it. I didn't respond. She texted again. "Can you just come home so we can talk?" I put my phone face down. I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I went back to the apartment. She was there, waiting. She'd clearly not slept well. There were shadows under her eyes, and she looked simultaneously relieved and nervous when she heard my key in the lock. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. "I'm glad you came back." "I came back to talk." She nodded. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd eaten Thai food alone back in February, which felt like a lifetime ago. I told her I wasn't going to do the fight version of this conversation. I told her I wasn't angry. That was true. I told her I was tired. That was also true. I told her that what I'd seen building for months, the distance, the vagueness, Flynn, the way she'd reframed every concern I raised as a character flaw of mine, had been real, and that I needed her to stop telling me it wasn't. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I wasn't trying to hurt you." "I know," I said. "Flynn is," she started. "I don't need the Flynn explanation," I said. "I'm not saying this is all your fault. I know I wasn't perfect either. I know I was checked out at times, distracted, not as present as I should have been. But at some point the relationship stopped being a place where I was allowed to have concerns, and that's not something I can come back from." She looked at the table. "I do have feelings for him," she said quietly. And even then, even at that admission, I didn't feel what I'd expected to feel. Not devastation, not rage, just a slow, resolving sadness. The kind that comes when something you suspected is confirmed. "I know," I said. "I figured. I never acted on it." "Okay. I want you to believe me. Maybe you didn't. It doesn't change what's already happened between us." She looked up. "So that's it?" "Yeah," I said. "That's it." The logistics of ending a 2-year cohabitation are deeply, relentlessly practical. Who gets the apartment? Who takes what? How do you divide the life you've built? The accumulated furniture and kitchen appliances and shared subscriptions and mutual friends. It took about a month to sort out. She kept the apartment. I moved into a smaller place about 20 minutes away. We divided things without much argument. She got the bookshelf. I got the coffee table. We split the kitchenware. The framed photo from the coast. Neither of us took it. It sat on the counter for the last 2 weeks. I was still coming by to collect things, and eventually, I think she just put it somewhere. I didn't ask. The mutual friend circle was its own thing to navigate. People found out gradually, the way these things always spread, not through any announcement, just through the slow revelation of absences. Her not being at things I showed up to. Me not being at things she showed up to. A few people reached out to check on me. I appreciated that. A few people reached out to ask what happened with a certain energy that felt more like curiosity than concern. I appreciated that less, but I understood it. Owen, to his credit, never once said, "I told you so." He just showed up. Showed up with bad takeout and worse jokes and the exact right quantity of silence when silence was what was needed. I want to tell you about the text she sent me, about 6 weeks after we'd officially ended things. I was at home, a Sunday evening, genuinely okay for the first time in a while. Not performing okay. Actually okay. I'd started cooking again. Real cooking, not just heating things up, and I was in the middle of making pasta when my phone buzzed. It was her. "Hey, I know this is probably weird. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was unfair to you for a long time. You deserved better than how I handled things." I put down the wooden spoon. Read it twice. Thought about it for a while. Then I wrote back. "Thank you for saying that. I hope you're well." And I meant it. Both parts. The appreciation and the wish. Because by that point, the anger, what little there had been, was already gone. What she'd done had hurt. What I'd allowed for longer than I should have had hurt too, in its own way. But neither of us had been monsters. We'd been two people who had grown in different directions and had both handled the misalignment poorly. She'd been avoidant and dishonest. I'd been conflict-averse for too long, and then decisive very suddenly at the end. Neither of those are heroic qualities. They're just human ones. Here's what I want to say about the months that followed. Because this is usually the part where the narrator talks about how liberating it all was, how they found themselves, how everything was better on the other side. And I'll be honest, it wasn't like that. Not right away. The first month was quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful. It was the quiet of a house where something used to be. You notice the absence before you notice the freedom. You notice that there's no one else's schedule to work around. And for a while that feels less like liberation and more like standing in a room where all the furniture has been removed. You know it's spacious. You're not sure yet what to do with the space. But the second month was different. I started sleeping through the night again. I stopped walking into my own home and gauging the temperature of someone else's mood. I stopped having a running background process in my brain constantly asking, "Is this okay? Are we okay?" What did that tone mean? Was that a good answer or a bad answer? The mental quiet was extraordinary. Not silence. Just the absence of static. I started remembering things about myself that I'd quietly filed away during the relationship. Things I liked. Things I'd stopped doing because they weren't compatible with someone else's preferences, or because there was never time, or because I'd simply stopped thinking about them somewhere along the way. I'd been a decent runner in my mid-20s and had given it up. I started again, not training for anything, just running. Early mornings. The city still half asleep. The specific piece of moving through space before the world gets loud. I'd stopped reading as much as I used to. I started again. I finished 4 books in the first month alone, which by my recent track record was practically a miracle. These are small things, I know, but small things accumulate. The person I was slowly becoming in those months wasn't a new person. He was someone I recognized, someone I'd missed. About 4 months after everything ended, I had a conversation that reframed some of it for me. I was at a family dinner, just my sister and her husband, casual, nothing formal, and my sister asked how I was doing. Not the polite "how are you?" The real one. The one where she actually wanted to know. I told her honestly. Told her I was better, that it had been hard, but I was clear-headed now, that I had no regrets about the decision, but that the months leading up to it had taken something out of me that I was still refilling. She nodded. Then she said, "Did you ever figure out when you knew it was really over?" I thought about that. "There was a moment," I said. She said, "Stop acting like you own me." And I realized she'd been rewriting our whole relationship in her head for a long time. In the version she was living in, I was the oppressor and she was the woman who needed to break free. But I wasn't. I'd just been her boyfriend, asking normal questions, wanting to be included. And when I agreed with her, when I said "you're right" and walked away, it wasn't because she'd won the argument. It was because I finally realized there'd never been an argument worth winning. My sister was quiet. Then she said, "That's a really healthy thing to understand." I shrugged. Took me long enough. I'm telling you this story not because I want sympathy. I'm past the stage where this is a wound. It's a scar now. And there's a difference. A wound is something you protect, something tender, something that changes how you move through the world because it hurts when touched. A scar is just topography, evidence of something that happened, proof that you healed. The thing that stays with me most from all of it isn't the argument, or what I read on her phone, or even the final kitchen confrontation. It's the 2 words I said in response. You're right. People hear those words, and they think capitulation. They think defeat. But those 2 words were the first time in nearly a year that I'd said something in that relationship that was completely, purely, unambiguously true. She was right. I didn't own her. I never claimed to. She could do whatever she wanted. And so could I. And what I wanted was a life where I wasn't constantly defending my own reasonableness. A life where asking to come to a social gathering wasn't a referendum on my character. A life where coming home didn't require calibration. Where the person I was with was actually, fully, with me. Those 2 words weren't concession. They were the first move of a man who finally remembered what he was worth. Last thing, I want to address something that I imagine some people are thinking. Why did I stay as long as I did? Why did I keep letting the reframing happen? Why didn't I say something sooner, push harder, demand more clarity? I've asked myself that plenty. And the honest answer is that I loved her. Not the version of her I'd been dealing with for the last year, but the version I'd known before that. The version from the coast trip in that framed photo. The version who laughed at everything I said. The version who used to fall asleep mid-conversation because we'd talked so late and she was too comfortable to move. That person had been real. What we had in the beginning had been real. And loving the memory of something real has kept smarter people than me in rooms they should have left a long time ago. I'm not that person anymore. The one who lingers in a room just because it used to be warm. I'm the one who notices when the warmth is gone and walks out. Quietly, with a clear head and a jacket over my arm. Click.